Thanks for being here. We're here with the Research Advisory Group talking today about some hot topics. Today's topic, the benefits of using RIASEC and career conversations in the classroom. How is that helpful to teachers? Dr. Emily, why don't you start us off? What are you thinking when it comes to this topic of the benefits of RIASEC and career conversations in the classroom?
Yeah, it's a really interesting take and perspective on this. As I've said before, the RIASEC can serve as this tool, organizing tool to understand yourself and the environments that you operate in. And that's not just the case for the students in the classroom. That's the case for the teacher as well. Helps them understand themselves, helps them understand the environments they operate in. And the environment that they're operating in for their paid work is made up of these students. And it can help them understand these people before them in relation to themselves and not only just the kids in relation to one another. And I think that's an advantage that's perhaps not readily apparent in this work. But teachers would inevitably understand themselves better, inevitably understand how they are similar to and different from their students, how that might impact the way they may interact with the student. I know in my experience, doing interventions with RIASEC, people in the room are often just become more empathetic to others because you think, what I like is what's cool and what other people like that's different is just weird. And if you start to see the full picture of, this is what exists in the world and the way people think about themselves and operate and where their interests lie, then you start thinking, okay, no, it's not really good and bad. It's just different. And there's an appreciation that happens there. And I think that can happen for the teacher as well when they perhaps have some students that they're like, what, why do the kids like to do it this way? Or why are they, how maybe should I adjust the way I'm engaging them because of the way they may be different?
Beautiful insights. Thank you for that. So the idea of self-knowledge and self-awareness and maybe even empathy and seeing the value in the diversity. Dave, what are your responses? What are your thoughts about that topic?
Well, building on what Emily just said, I think that empathy, that way of finding out about the whole student, not just what they know about a thing I've been teaching, but actually getting to know the student as a person, um, that opens up things for the teacher to actually pay attention really to the student rather than the curriculum. And there's lots out there about paying attention to the curriculum, but once they start paying attention to the student and really get curious about the student, and the student recognizes that, well, then you have this situation where they can start uh, teaching differently, delivering their content differently, if you want to use that phrase. But it becomes a thing where the student understands they're being recognized for who they are. The teacher understands this student learns differently than I do, maybe, or the same, and adjusts what they're doing. And what you have is just far greater engagement as these conversations carry on, because the students are active agents by virtue of these conversations. The teachers see that, and all of a sudden, motivation isn't a classroom problem. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you. So the idea of motivation increasing, the idea of empathy, the idea of recognition of differences. Michael, how would you extend the thinking, or what would you like to add to or clarify about those thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll follow up on themes that Emily and Dave have mentioned. I think there's two things, and the first is that when teachers are doing solid career development work and they're learning about career development as something developmental that happens over time, and they're helping students to do it. I think almost without exception, it changes the culture in a school. And I think teachers themselves start to see themselves differently and start to apply the concepts to their own lives. And I'll just say, in a national school study we were involved in, some of the qualitative responses showed that teachers were thinking about their own work, they're thinking about job redesign, they're thinking about supporting their family, they're thinking about helping their kids the same way, that they're really personally impacted by learning about career development and how it works. That's one thing. And then the other thing is just working this way with students. I think of the kind of people that teachers are, that they care about students and they're thinking about student development and they're thinking about the real people that they're supporting and helping to grow. Teachers that do this work do it because it's an expression of their values and what they care about and what's important to them. So working this way amplifies that. It's actually, I think it's probably really supportive of career satisfaction for teachers themselves to work this way with students.
Wonderful reminders about the benefits to the families, the benefits to the value structures that motivate people to engage as they're thinking about why they're even engaged in school in the first place. Ed, what are you seeing out there in the classrooms? You spend a lot of time shoulder to shoulder with teachers.
Well, I'm being very much activated by what's been shared so far, and naturally takes me into the classroom, envisioning teachers actually doing the work shoulder to shoulder with them. And I can't help but think about the instructional strategies and practices that teachers have been employing as they integrate this language, this common career language of RIASEC, in their daily routines, in the methods that they use, the moves that they use so naturally. And we've seen it in brain breaks, in bell ringers, in the anticipatory set, in anchor charts, in groupings, in exit tickets. It's been marvelous. But I can't help but remember one particular teacher this year, either third or fourth grade, who said, "Mr. Hidalgo, I can't believe you're doing rounds this week. I wish you were here last week." I said, "What happened?" And she goes, "Well, you won't believe it. We were working on TDA, text-dependent analysis," which I had to go and research what is that, because I didn't know what it was. But it's a method that teachers use to help students analyze text and then provide better evidence around their ideas of what they're reading. And this student, who typically doesn't share out quite a bit in class, let's say that, she noticed had circled the word build in the text. And she was surprised by this. So she asked the student, said, "Tell me, why did you circle the word build?" And the student said, "Because the main character is realistic and investigative." And she was a bit taken back by this experience, but thought to go a little bit further, and then said, "Would you be interested in sharing with the class the evidence that's leading you to believe that the main character is realistic and investigative?" And sure enough, this student got out of their seat, went to the front of the class, and shared 3 minutes, approximately in her words, 3 minutes about why the student had circled that word and why the student was identifying this main character as realistic and investigative. To me, it was a perfect example of how teachers are using the language in their natural teacher moves to help students really with their learning, but also in learning about the student.
Great story about how the RIASEC can actually amplify or resurrect even instructional strategies that might have been pushed to the side, or some that have kind of been dusty from infrequent use, but a way of up-leveling. And so, Christina, what else are you seeing in the research about what's evident and what are we noticing as trend lines, or what are we seeing across possibly even zip codes and time zones? What are we knowing about the applications of this way of approaching career conversations and benefits to teachers?
Okay, so I of course, there's never enough time to look at all the literature, but from having had a look at literature and from our own research and all the years of looking at career conversations, what's apparent is that teachers, or the outcomes to teachers, haven't yet been measured, at least quantitatively, potentially through having the qualitative interviews such as those that Michael was mentioning, but not in a very targeted way, and not certainly in connection with being the ones managing these career conversations, or actually any career guidance in schools. What I think can be good connections is what we have found to be, for example, very meaningful factors for student outcomes in usual teaching and learning. For example, we know that positive expectations, teacher feedback, and relational quality really are the most, or within the most meaningful factors for students' academic and not only academic outcomes in school. That's one connection we can make. Another is how we have been learning that teachers in charge of, or at least with a certain role in school, towards taking care of the mental health of students, actually vicariously get influenced by the mental health of that student. So I think that if we were to predict what happens here in the context of career guidance, or at least in career conversations more particularly, is that what Emily and Dave and Michael have been saying is that teachers do vicariously gain from students gaining too. So we have been predicting that, not yet to design a quantitative or have applied it to the research yet, but we did interview 22 students, to 22 teachers, pardon, in Quakertown in the second year of implementing career conversations there. So we had a historical longitudinal view of these teachers and what had been at the start and at the end. And there were three types of teachers in terms of how they saw RIASEC being applied to into career conversations. And some saw it as a tool for classroom management. And two other groups saw it more towards, one was towards instruction, so how to plan and personalize instruction. And a third group saw it as an opportunity to make links between the learning content and the world of work. Certainly, what was very clear in the interviews is that those teachers who saw RIASEC as an opportunity to make links with the world of work were the ones seeing that students had more ownership of career conversations and more agency of career conversations. And as a result, they too started seeing career conversations and not as something to plan for, but more of a relational approach to teaching. While those teachers who saw RIASEC as a management tool, or indeed just a behavioral management tool, didn't mention so much student agency or gain of ownership, and they didn't go on to those conclusions of how they didn't have to plan so much for career conversations. So I think there's, if anything, a lot of opportunities for research. I do see how, for example, we could start looking at teachers' own well-being as a result of managing career conversations, their sense of connectedness and their sense of self-efficacy in their work, but also their sense of teacher identity. Is teacher identity changing as a result of that? So more questions than conclusions, I'd say.
Well, that's what's so great about this group. And thank you all for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I feel like I'm always challenged to think more deeply. And Christina, I think that's a good note. There's more to come. We look forward to future conversations. So thank you all.